Welcome everyone. My name's Christy Spire. I'm the team leader for nature education here at Green Adelaide, and thanks for joining us from 4 to 5 this afternoon. Really appreciate those jumping in and those jumping in to listen to the recording later on. I'd like to acknowledge this amazing country that most of us, I think, are living on and coming to this on. Ngadlu Tampanthi, Ngadlu Gana Yatanga Imparenti, which translates that we acknowledge this land of the Kaurna people, and we all love working and learning from them. And I know that a lot of you online today would have had the privilege of working with them. So let's keep that going. Let's keep learning and sharing and working together. So we're excited this afternoon. This is actually the 7th instalment of our seminar series for 2024. And we're running these to really help share the great work that's happening right across Adelaide to make it cooler, greener, wilder and more climate resilient. And we thank everyone that's involved in that work, professionally, personally. It's amazing to hear all the stories and share those through these series. So today you are invited to ask questions at any time by putting them into the chat, and we will answer as many as those as we can at the end. So you don't have microphones attached to you today, but we do have loads of information to share afterwards. So let's jump right in. Green Adelaide is embarking on a bold rewilding project aiming to bring platypus back to the Karrawirra Pari. Still learning that one, the River Torrens. This iconic Australian animal serves as an umbrella species. Conserving them and their habitat will benefit a multitude of other species in the ecosystem. So today you're going to be hearing from wildlife ecologist Dr. Liberty Olds, who will delve into the fascinating world of the platypus and the promising steps being taken to explore if we can introduce them to Adelaide's rivers. You will hear interesting insights from a recent scoping study and a summary of the ongoing work and preparations required to consider the very exciting possibility of returning platypus to Adelaide's rivers. So the session today is broken up into about 40 minutes with Liberty, and then after that we'll have a Q&A session, and we hope to wrap up at 5 o'clock and let you know about upcoming series as well. So I'm going to hand over to Liberty. Thanks so much. And we'll make sure that your slides are shareable.
Catching up. Hopefully.
Awesome. So I can see them and now they're on big. Fantastic.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks Christy for the introduction. I just also like to reiterate Christy's acknowledgement of country, but I'd also like to acknowledge the huge number of people in Green Adelaide that have been part of this and the many projects that are going on across our region. So I'm fortunate that I've been able to present some of this information today, but we do have a really fantastic team behind all of the work that we do. I know that there's been, I guess, quite a few people subscribe to this session that may not have heard about Green Adelaide previously. So South Australia is divided up into 9 landscape regions underneath the Landscape South Australia Act framework. And as part of that framework, Green Adelaide formed really the first, I guess, dedicated government urban specialised group. We're governed by a statutory board that guide a lot of the activities that we do, but we have a really large proportion of the population in South Australia within our region. So we support around 1.3 of the million people in South Australia within Green Adelaide. So it's a really important area. Our area is nearly 3,500 square kilometres, including both terrestrial area as well as some of the marine. So we have a whole range of different projects, and I guess that's just really some of the context around what we're doing. As an organisation, we have various goals that we are working towards as part of our legislated priorities, and the rewilding project sits within this vision. I really love the artwork that Alan Sumner put together that shows the relationship between land, water, sea, biodiversity and people, which is really what Green Adelaide is about. It's about bringing all these things together as part of our vision, and you can see it there, which is the cooler, greener, wilder and climate resilient Adelaide, and the important part as well that celebrates our unique culture. So I guess that's just a bit of background as to who we are and why we're thinking about this project, and what the project might potentially entail. Also thought I'd quickly introduce the concept of rewilding. Many of you have probably heard of species being reintroduced, but rewilding is a different approach to doing that. Rewilding is about a holistic approach, about restoring systems. So you might hear about a species being reintroduced because they've gone extinct in the wild. They're still under existing risks of extinction, and by increasing the number and localities of that particular species, you can improve the conservation outcomes for those populations. Rewilding takes a different approach. It's about considering the environmental, the climate, and the social benefits of improving our ecosystems. And there have been proven benefits across all of those, both internationally and within Australia as well. And Green Adelaide has really been thinking about rewilding across the landscape, with a particular urban lens on what we're doing. And I just put a couple of the pictures from some of Green Adelaide's media there, just around that, rewilding Adelaide and some of these projects is really part of every day that everyone can contribute to. So that's a really important part of our projects. So why are we talking about platypus today? I think it's unsurprising that they're a pretty enigmatic creature. They are very unique. They are really different to anything else. And they're iconic. They're iconic to South Australia. Internationally, they're, among the drop bears. And they put a different perspective on some of the things that we're able to do. But the actual project itself is really not about platypus. And I say that I will be obviously talking about a lot of aspects of platypus biology and the work that we've been doing that is contributing to the project. But platypus are an ambassador species for us. They're one part of a much bigger puzzle. And we're talking about catchment scale, community scale efforts to really restore and support our urban waterways, and in particular, the River Torrens. And hopefully as we go through the presentation, I'll probably sound like I'm repeating myself a bit, in the sense that we really are trying to take a whole of a system approach to this, and that's why platypus is hopefully an enabler for us to be able to undertake a range of activities. Platypus themselves are unusual creatures. They are semi-aquatic, so that means that they live in both the water and on the land, and that is quite a unique characteristic. There's only a few other animals that do this as well. They are a monotreme. So a monotreme means that they lay eggs, but they're also a mammal, so they lactate and feed their young through milk. The other local species that you might be familiar with is the short-beaked echidna, and they are also monotremes. So platypus lay 1 to 3 eggs. These eggs are held within a nest in a long burrow, and their young emerge from these eggs in what we call an altricial state. What that means is it's a bit like humans. Those youngs, and you can see from the picture there, those youngs are really underdeveloped, and they're heavily reliant on their parents for care. After hatching, the babies stay in the burrows for a period of time, few months, and then they emerge in summer. So during that time, the mother is looking after them and feeding them. And the conditions within the nest, as you can imagine, when they're in that really underdeveloped state, the conditions in the nest are really important for them. They have a couple of different types of burrows. So they have their nesting burrows, which can be quite long and extensive. They also have what are called camping burrows. So they'll use little divots in the sides of banks or underneath logs and things like that as more temporary homes, and particularly males will use those more transient camps. Like I mentioned, they are semi-aquatic, so they do all of that reproductive aspects and resting really on land, but then they spend a lot of their time foraging in water. And these images are from the Hobart Rivulet here, but I think they give a really, I'll get that one started. I think they give a really good picture of how the animals use the riverbeds. So they have some really unique characteristics in terms of their bill. Their bill is a pretty gnarly thing. They have electroreceptors and they have other specialized push rod receptors, and they can use those to detect insect movement in the streams. They can not only detect the movement, they can even tell the distance based on the different types of receptors that get set off as insects move and twitch. So it's pretty incredible what they're able to do. And then once they've basically filled up their cheek pouches with the food that they've been able to seek out, they then come up to the surface for air and they will grind it down with their bills. So they have a pretty interesting way of doing things, but really highly specialized, and yeah, really, really interesting species to be working with and to try and understand. And I think it's pretty cool being able to watch them move through the stream and do their foraging. Because of these different lifestyle habits, from hiding and taking shelter in the banks to spending most of their time foraging when they're in the water, there actually isn't a great deal of information historically on platypus. So the information that we know is quite poor. In fact, some of the recent assessments have shown that there was actually no systematic surveys of platypus within Australia prior to 1970. Some of the recent efforts have gone back, and there's been a recent publication around tracking these historical accounts. So going back and using museum records, explorer notes, bounty information from platypus skins, a whole range of information, and putting that all together to give us a picture of what their potential pre-European distribution was, and to give us an idea of where some of the areas are that they've been experiencing declines. And I think you can see from that map there, it shows the areas in grey where they expect that they used to inhabit, and in green where they still inhabit, and the area within South Australia where there have been no wild formal records for many years. So it's an important conservation consideration as to how undergoing a platypus rewilding project might be able to contribute to the national population and the national efforts that are underway to try and resolve some of these declines. The records for South Australia are also very scarce. The observations were rare. That's paired with what we would consider by our standards now pretty poor record keeping. So things like little newspaper clippings or some of those previous records that I mentioned. So there's really not a lot of information from South Australia, but we do know that they were here and they were in the River Torrens. They were already declining by the early 1900s to the point that they were protected in 1912, and at that point they actually suspected they may have already gone extinct. So that is a long time ago, and when you look at what, and these are pictures of the River Torrens, what the River Torrens looked like in the 1800s, sorry, I think the PowerPoint's just a bit slow to catch up. The system really was very, very degraded. It was a highly modified system. It was being used for a whole range of activities. And I'll just go back a slide there. You can see there, even during the Depression, there were camps that were established within the riverbanks itself. There was all sorts of infrastructure being implemented. There are records that there was an estimated 7,000 cesspits underneath the city of Adelaide, all of which fed into the River Torrens. So It was being really used for everything from washing to drinking to cooking. There was also a whole range of what were considered land management practices that included bringing infrastructure and rocks in to fill in the riverbeds, as well as carting sand out of the riverbed. So it is a highly modified system, and I don't think that's something that we can really shy away from. But if you think about these pictures, and hopefully you've had the chance to be wandering down the River Torrens recently, they are very vastly different. And we hope that, I guess, you'll get a sense that things have changed since then. And I will say that, you know, there's been over 40 years worth of work going to try and improve and restore these systems. We've seen things like the development of Linear Park, which has been really a landscape scale approach to recovery efforts. And there have been a huge range of efforts from a lot of people, and from the regional board, from Adelaide Mountain Lofty Rangers when it was in that form, to councils, friends of park, Rotary groups, school groups, volunteers, individuals. It is a huge range of people, and I can't obviously list them all. But I think, you know, looking at those pictures from the 1800s to what the system looks like now, we have come a really long way to try and bring the system back to a form that is potentially ready for platypus. So where did we go to from there? And platypus has been talked about multiple times over the years, but I think this is probably the first time that it's really been considered from a broader group of people. One of the early activities we did was we brought a working group together, and that working group, again, I've popped a few logos of different organisations that were involved there, but there are a whole range of people and stakeholders, both in that room or in communication in the lead up and afterwards. And that working group has really set the agenda for some of the assessments that we've been undertaking for both the platypus and for the wider system. And I will say that some of these things probably seem like no-brainers. They're food resources, like we would need habitat, we need somewhere to live, but there is a whole lot of detail behind these that is quite platypus specific, as well as a whole lot of detail that is river specific as well, and system specific. So these really set the agenda for some of the assessments that I'll be talking about, and some of the results that we've been finding. But in the first instance, the expertise and the visits that we had to the Torrens were really positive, and indicated that it was something worthwhile pursuing. Having said that, one of the first deal breakers for the project was really the presence of opera house traps within the system. Opera house traps are a closed trap. So when something enters the trap, it basically can't escape from any direction. For air-breathing animals, such as obviously platypus, but other things like ricali and turtles, it means that they can't get up to get air, and they basically drown within these traps. From July last year, these traps were banned in South Australia, which is a huge shift for us, and a really great outcome for biodiversity. The shift allows pyramid traps to still be used, and there's an example there where you can see the top of the trap is open. So it means things like ricali, which seek the water surface, are able to pop up through the top of the trap. But things like yabbies are still caught in the bottom because they don't naturally seek that sort of surface movement. We've hosted a couple of events, which have been really amazing to see the subscription and the interest and the willingness for people to get on board with changing the use of these traps. And we've swapped out nearly 3,500 opera house traps for pyramid traps, which is, I think, a really great outcome. Unfortunately, we are still seeing the occasional trap within the system, and recently our team was out doing some field work and we found an opera house trap with a deceased ricali in it. So there are still some out there, but certainly when you look at things like Marketplace or Gumtree and the local stores, they're certainly not sold in those anymore, and pyramid traps are being more widely used. So a great outcome. But there are a lot of other things that we also needed to look at, and food resources was really one of the key aspects to understanding whether or not platypus would have a chance of surviving within the River Torrens. Macroinvertebrates are their main food resource. So macroinvertebrates basically describe an invertebrate that doesn't have a backbone, and macro being an animal that is large enough to be able to see without needing a microscope. So if you go down to the river and you have a look in the water, you might be able to see some of these things yourself. These are little invertebrates that are the primary resource for platypus. We use some historic information primarily from EPA data. It was historically collected across different seasons, and quite variable in its time scale. But the information within that showed some really positive indications in terms of the biodiversity and biomass of the macroinvertebrates within the river. But we need to have a better understanding really about how that macroinvertebrate food source is going to change over time. And so we have established some monitoring sites that we will be visiting across the seasons and looking at particular areas of interest, such as during summer when it's obviously much drier, as well as during winter when the system tends to be flushed more frequently, and what the abundance and diversity of macroinvertebrates is within the system at those times. And we'll do that for a number of seasons. We completed a survey in May. We're due to do one in the next coming weeks with hopefully some rain if it ever arrives. But they really sets the scene for us in terms of what resources are available for platypus to be able to survive. Macroinvertebrates are also a really key indicator for system health. So taking platypus out of the picture, they're actually a tremendous indicator for water quality. And if you have poor water quality, you won't be able to support the macroinvertebrate diversity that you would hope for. And so beyond just this platypus project, we're getting a really great picture of river health. And that will help us move towards some targets that we would like for restoration. So really important part of the picture. We also undertook some habitat, water and flow assessments, and these are ongoing. I mentioned earlier that we have 17 councils within Green Adelaide. A whole number of those, I think it's 9, actually have management responsibilities for the River Torrens, along with SA Water and other stakeholders. There's private land, so there's a whole different group of people involved, and we haven't, in a sense, had a bigger picture assessment of the river and the habitat across its length that I'm aware of. And so we were working with AquaSave, who are really aquatic experts, and they were able to undertake an assessment. They went and looked at 140 different locations across the river. We separated out into sections just based on morphology and some of the management differentiations, and really to make the information that we were getting in just a little bit easier to digest, because there is a lot of information in there. And some of the things that they were looking at include stream type. Are there pools? Are they riffles, which are little shallow parts of the stream? What does the bank look like? Is there erosion? What sort of vegetation is in the area? What's the water depth? As well as taking some of those other quality parameters. I'm hoping that slide changed over. So just a couple of examples of the things that they were looking at, including infrastructure, water depth, and so forth. Sorry, she's a bit slow catching up. I'll jump to the next slide. So yeah, these are just some of the images where there's a dry riverbed. You've got areas where there's weeds and kikuyu growing through. We've got some areas of infrastructure where the bank has been built up and meshed. Areas where there's pools and riffles, and you can imagine across the length of the river, getting a picture of what the whole system looks like has been really important. But again, not only for platypus, but for all of the other things that we really want to understand and achieve for the whole of system. We've also been looking at pools and cease to flow events. If you've been down the river during a particularly rainy period, you will notice that the river can rise really rapidly. At the same time, it can dissipate just as quickly and discharge. So it is what is considered a really flashy system in that it can change really rapidly. It also has periods of dry and what we call cease to flow, and that is, as it sounds, it is when the river stops flowing, it ceases to flow. And so what do those things mean for platypus, but also for the biodiversity of this system? How do they influence where we're doing work, where we're doing planting, but also what the flows look like over time and how they change over seasons? We are working with some colleagues interstate who have been doing some really amazing habitat modelling and looking at long-term flow data. And so we're just in the process of undertaking some current and historic modelling of habitat suitability of the waterways and of the flow regimes that we're seeing, and to potentially also influence or improve our understanding of the impacts that climate change will have on the system as well. So there's a whole lot of modelling being undertaken. They use data that they've got from their water flow and test different setups and different systems and different regimes and have a look at the impacts. And we're very fortunate that they're going to be able to apply that to the information that we have from South Australia as well. And so I just, again, want to highlight that while we can apply the platypus lens and habitat information to some of these modellings and improving our understanding of the river, it is really improving our understanding much more broadly. And we hope that we'll have that really great information base that's useful not only for us, but for a range of our stakeholders as well. We've also been undertaking some assessments to evaluate the likelihood that there are potentially any remaining animals in the system. Now, I say that because we do often have, I guess, community sightings and information. We suspect that they are all ricali, but we do know that there used to be platypus in the system. So we've been undertaking eDNA assessments. eDNA basically describes environmental DNA, so DNA that can be collected from soil, water, or sediment samples. And the DNA originates from species living in that surrounding environment. So, for instance, if you were to go and swim in a dam, you would unknowingly be shedding cells and hair, and hopefully that's all. But you would then be able to go and sample that water, and we would be able to identify that you had been present in that dam. And so we're trying to do the same with the waterways in South Australia. I will put a big to be advised here. But I just thought I'd share the locations where we have been undertaking the assessments. We recognise the information that has been coming in. We've expanded doing these assessments to both the Torrens and the Sturt and the Onkaparinga. So looking in these other catchments. The sampling method varies in its reliability. It's not 100%. As you can imagine, you're taking a sample from a large water body. So there is also some seasonal variation within those samples. So we've done some sampling already. We're just about in the coming weeks to undertake our final round of sampling, and the final results are to be advised, and we're really looking forward to sharing what we would find. We were hoping we might have squeezed some of it in before this presentation, but that hasn't been feasible. I guess part of this is also I really wanted to share with everyone that we are being very diligent in our efforts. It's important that we've been listening to community and what's been going on, to go and have a look at some of those historical sighting locations and to get a really clear picture of what's happening across these waterways. We've also been undertaking assessments on Kangaroo Island for a number of reasons. Part of the efforts that we're doing, we really want to contribute to understanding of platypus more broadly. And we can share these results with obviously yourselves, but as well as landholders and other stakeholders on the island. It's been a really great learning opportunity as well for a lot of Green Adelaide staff and people involved in the project to go out and undertake these assessments. And I think we've picked up a number of locations that weren't previously formally recognised as having platypus present at these locations. So we're really trying to build on the knowledge that we have. Kangaroo Island is a introduced population, so they didn't exist on Kangaroo Island previously, and then there were two periods of introduction in the 1920s and 1940s from Tasmania and Victoria, and it's thought that it's only the Victorian genetics that persist on the island, but we haven't had a good picture of all of those spots where the platypus are potentially persisting. This is also really good information following the fires that happened in 2019, 2020. So again, it's part of that whole of species approach that we're trying to take with the project to really improve our learnings across our stakeholders, as well as learnings about the species. And Kangaroo Island is quite unique in how much it, I guess, dries out and what the systems look like compared to where platypus are persisting in the eastern states. And so we can get a better picture about the types of habitat that they're using and what their habitat requirements are, and apply those to our understanding for the project within Green Adelaide. We've also been consulting with Ghana, and this is a really, I guess, exciting area for Green Adelaide, and I won't go into depth on some of the aspects that we've been looking at, but I just really wanted to highlight, I guess, our commitment to cultural heritage. So we are hoping that we can help rebuild some of the connections for Ghana to the species and connect those to interstate community as well. We really want to set the bar high in terms of our land management practices and trialling things like cultural burning and understanding what's important for the system and what was culturally undertaken. It is a highly modified system, and so things are going to be different. There's a lot of infrastructure, but I think we can broach those and come together. We're also looking at gathering cultural heritage information for the system as well, and developing up some site plans and heritage plans for ensuring that that heritage isn't lost or damaged with any of the activities that are being undertaken along the river. And I have to say, I've been really fortunate to spend a bit of time on the river. Not that long ago, we had a day out having a look at some sites and discussing all of the opportunities for collaboration and sharing knowledge. And the approach that we're taking to the project is a whole of system approach. And I feel like I'm becoming super repetitive in actually saying that that's our approach, but it is really, really important. And we really want to be taking that whole of system lens, and I feel like that is really important for Ghana as well. And so we hope that we can foster these things into the future and talk about all of the opportunities. We have been really fortunate to receive a lot of support as well. We've been working with a whole range of platypus researchers across the country. Myself and Jason were able to head over to Victoria and actually see platypus, learn about trapping, learn about some of the nuances of this species, because they really are a unique species to be working with. We also have a whole range, and I mentioned some of them in that working group, we have a whole range of people that are really passionate and have been really willing to share their knowledge. And I think it's been really important for both the project and for moving towards our restoration efforts that we're able to bring all of these stakeholders and expertise in, and really listen to honest opinions and have really sometimes hard discussions, but important discussions as well. And so I do want to acknowledge that from attending our workshops to coming to meetings to having us attend their meetings to responding to emails and phone calls. I just really want to acknowledge that there's a lot of people, too many to even list, that have been part of this bigger picture project, and thank them for their willingness. Contextually, I think that it's probably worth also sharing, we have a lot of things underway. And I mentioned a few of the key feasibility assessments that have got us to where we are now, but there are still a lot of things to be done. And I really want to highlight that it's not just platypus related projects, that there are a lot of other things going on in terms of actually looking towards reintroduction itself. There are permits, ethics and endorsements that we would need to develop up. And a lot of the information that we've been collecting is really contributing to the information within those documents. We also need to look at potential animal sources, doing some more monitoring of the river as well, and getting a better concept of platypus and the feasibility. So there is a lot of platypus specific work that is still to happen. And I think it's probably important to highlight that, there's time scales and we can't control all of these things, and that it is still in the feasibility stage, but we are moving really as fast and rapidly as we can, because we know that there are a lot of people very excited about this potential, and so we're really working hard on it. We do have a lot of other projects underway as well that are really environmental based projects, and whilst they will have beneficial outcomes for platypus, they have much broader outcomes as well, from on-ground restoration, trying to put some of the flora back and look at the land management, incorporating things like threatened flora species, to undertaking weed control at a range of scales, from large scale to looking at, ash and some of those larger species, to really specific stuff on ground. All of those efforts can have a really important impact on the system. There's a lot of flow work going on, and I mentioned some of that previously, but understanding how the river changes over time, across a year, across 10 years, across 50 years, and with the influence of climate change is really important for that whole of system, and for a lot of the other species that are using the system as well. We are also looking at other habitat quality enhancement options. There's things like pigeons that use some of the bridges, so how can we better improve the outcomes for the river, and control and manage some of those. And I know there's a lot of people that have been interested in litter management. There's a lot of programs in place already. Again, highlighting this is one of the areas that, it really is up to all of community to try and help chip away at some of these things and be responsible for their own lifestyles. But more broadly, we do have things in place such as stormwater management, gross pollutant traps and things like that to try and improve that system. And our preliminary assessments of litter and of the system itself have shown that it actually doesn't look too bad. So obviously opera house traps are an ongoing issue, and we'll continue to help get those out of the system. But there's a lot of other management aspects that are really improving it as a whole. And again, highlighting that we have a whole range of people, not only within Green Adelaide, but all of our stakeholders, from councils to friends groups, that are part of these on-ground efforts to improve our system. We also have cultural heritage assessments and are engaging with Ghana, and we're just working through what community engagement will look like and what the opportunities are. There are a lot of stakeholders involved. There are a lot of people, I know a lot of people online today will, ask what can they do to help. We're looking at how we can incorporate those needs, and I'll bring it, I guess, back to that initial sense of what rewilding is. And we've talked about platypus and we've talked about the environment, but the really key part of that was also the social benefits. And I think we're already seeing more people engaged with the river and thinking about the river, and and their own backyards than we have previously, and that's already been a really fantastic outcome for the project. And events like Opera House Traps, we've seen a diversity of people come and not only swap traps but engage with the information and think about things a little bit differently. So it really is a far-reaching project. I will also say, and many of you may be involved already, but we do have a page on our website that invites people to stay up to date, and our wonderful comms team will share information as it comes through. So please jump on board. It also means that if you have questions, I certainly can't answer them all. It means that your questions are going to get directed to the right person or the right team that will be able to support your interests and get people involved in this wonderful project. And I'll leave it on that note. It's a lot of information to digest, and there is a lot of things being undertaken by Green Adelaide and all of our stakeholders. And I really hope that you can see that the river is a really important part of the city and a really important part of Green Adelaide, as are the other waterways, and that we're really trying our best to do what we can to improve them and improve biodiversity. And we'll keep our fingers crossed that platypus will be part of that in the not too distant future.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Liberty. Yes, you covered a lot in a short period of time, and yeah, really exciting whole of systems project, and yeah, lots of applauses coming through, and plenty of questions as well. So I'll kick off with a few. I think some of them you may have answered, but I'll start off with the one from Ethan. If platypus reintroduce, will physical structures along the river like the weir and Kangaroo Creek Dam prevent natural movement of the species?
So, no. They're actually quite incredible animals in what they can actually traverse. And so there's been, in the eastern states, there's been video footage of them climbing pretty high cliffs and using infrastructure and climbing up pipelines and things like that. One of the things that we are trying to do is to, I guess, afford them protection, and not just them, other biodiversity, that if we can look towards planting around these areas and improving the areas around this sort of infrastructure, it just reduces the risk for those animals when they're out in the open.
Fantastic. And I think you answered the question in terms of resources and that kind of thing for community groups and friends of parks and that kind of, or the river sections, to access information as the project continues. Are you just encouraging everyone to kind of stay informed through the website and newsletters and that kind of thing, and that as we go, we'll share more opportunities for community members and friends of groups to get active with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's been a number of groups involved through Green Adelaide's Volunteer Connect that we've spoken to. We do have some other groups in place, such as the River Torrens Restoration Group, who've been really focusing on weeds and bringing all the council areas together. So there is information kind of filtering through lots of different sources, and it really depends on the group and the interest as to how we can direct people's inquiries. And so that's why I suggest us to if you haven't got a contact or been involved so far, jump on board, and we'll get more information out. And a lot of the information that has been shared is available through feasibility studies, and we're certainly very transparent in sharing that information on our website and sharing our reports.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that people, it's kind of causing that interest amongst the community, and they are wanting to get active and that type of thing. And there's definitely things that people can be doing to support support the river more generally as well in the lead up to the project. So please, contact your volunteer groups, contact here at Green Adelaide or directly through us, and we'll help to support you as much as we can in any way. So that'd be great. How much of a threat are foxes and dogs and cats? I think is a great question.
So they do predate on platypus, but their lifestyle means that they obviously spend a lot of time in the water. Their ecology means that they're in the water or in the banks. It's when they're moving over those open banks. And so we do have modified areas such as large open mode areas that potentially predators that have access to them. Cats are thought to be less of an issue than foxes, and dogs, everyone should have their dogs on a lead anyway, so we'll nip that one in the bud now. But part of the restoration efforts, and it's not just for platypus, it's for those other species as well, for instance Ricali, is that we're really trying to bring some of the native vegetation back into the banks and improve that protection, as well as support the cultural heritage in those areas. So they do pose an issue, but we're doing all we can to mitigate those risks and better understand those risks.
Fantastic. Is there any impact of the algae blooms that happen in the river on platypus that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of, and I'm not sure that it's not my area of expertise.
We can follow that one up if you need.
Algae aren't necessarily a bad thing. The things that influence them are that resource availability. So things that affect the macroinvertebrates will affect platypus survival. And I'm not sure that there is necessarily any evidence to say that algal blooms would affect.
Fantastic. I am just working back and forth between the Q&A and the chat. This is a good one. A question about food sources. What are the plans around other species reintroduction in terms of fish and mollusks and that kind of thing to help support the web of food species used by the platypus? I mean, I suppose that's what the eDNA is kind of showing, whether there's enough existing food species for them already, isn't it?
And I think that is a really good point to highlight, that we've already seen things like purple spotted gudgeons be reintroduced to the river. So that's a really great indicator that the health of the river has really improved with all of the efforts that people have been putting in. In terms of other reintroductions, we're working through fish translocation options. So looking at other species that would potentially be reintroduced into the river. They're not necessarily a rapidly moving thing, but we are looking at options and how we can work with other areas such as urban wetlands to support fish reintroductions across Green Adelaide. I think once we have the information from the most recent macroinvertebrate assessments, we'll have a much better idea of exactly what is in the system now and how we can improve it if it needs to be. It may well, not need anything done to it. So
And and as you've been saying, it's about the whole system, and looking at that full ecosystem web and food web and everything as everything's going along. Awesome. And yes, I know you love this question because everyone's asking, but what's the expected date of the reintroduction? So I'll just, because I think that's an important one to kind of be transparent about. But
look, I'll say in the coming years, because I think they are a very seasonal animal, and I think we have to be realistic about that. We are being very ambitious, and we would like them, if it is feasible, to be as soon as possible. But having said that, we also don't want to be putting animals in a situation that is not going to be best for their survival. So I think that is something that we're being quite honest about. in terms of timing, you know, the physical movement of animals has to be timed really carefully around the animal's biology as well. So, you know, thinking about when the animals are breeding, when they might have juveniles, when you wouldn't want to be moving animals around. And so, you know, the potential for us to add on years is quite possible. But we are, you know, if we are able to say, yes, this is going to happen, it will be in the, I'm going to say not too distant future. I know that was a very political answer. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. No, all good. And a good question here about the Ricali, and for those people online that might not know much about it, I think it would be just great to highlight the water rat that lives in the system. That, but also, this question is more about, you know, do they exist prevalently along the river, and do they compete with the platypus for food sources or anything like that, or
great question.
Any kind of competition between the Ricali and the platypus?
We do have lots of Ricali in the system, which is really cool. I think Ricali are very, very cool animals.
Yeah, cool.
They have slightly different dietary requirements, so they do overlap in some things, but for the most part, think about platypus, they use macroinvertebrates, which are at a much smaller scale than what Ricali would use. Ricali tend to use bigger things. They're predators on things like, you say, mollusks, or even they'll eat birds and things like that. They're much, they have a much larger prey diet, so they don't necessarily overlap very much in terms of food competition. And I feel like there's been a lot of debate about who would win in a Ricali versus platypus battle. And I think there's evidence that both have won previously. So I know there's been some evidence of them coming to blows, and platypus have come out the winner and Ricali have come out the winner. They coexist in a really large range of their distribution. And so whilst amazing for us to be able to understand a bit more about our Ricali population, and it's not something that I guess we're concerned would be a preventative to platypus. It's not going to prevent platypus from surviving. So
fantastic. I think maybe we need to have a session on Ricali. Because I think a lot of people don't even know about them. So that's awesome. Thanks for that question, Kerry. Not a question, just to say thank you for such an informative and interesting presentation. Very appreciated. Thank you. It's great to hear from people that these are meeting the mark and getting you the information that you need. Fantastic. I think we've covered off on everyone's questions, and for some of those extra bits and pieces that people were asking, we'll send out an email to everyone that's online or that registered with us today to follow up on some of those queries and questions, and links where you can find information that Liberty mentioned as well. So we'll give you all an early minute. So thanks so much for jumping in today. Our next session is actually going to be on frogs of Adelaide with our resident expert and also winner of the South Australian Citizen Science Award just recently, Steve Walker. So we're excited about that one on the 24th of September at 4 p.m. And we've got lots of other exciting sessions planned for you as well. So thanks so much for your time today, Liberty, and for speaking into what is sometimes not a very interactive void, but I think a lot of people have really appreciated the session, and we hope that all of you that are watching online at a later date that's more convenient for you found that really informative as well. And thanks to you and all the team for the work that's being done. Lots of thank yous coming through as well. So awesome. Thanks so much.